Welcome to the ID Talks again. As you know, ID Talks is a series of webinars that is brought to you by Salto Inclusion and Diversity. And this spring, we have partnered with Europe Goes Local to have a closer look at municipal youth work practices and strategies that are gathered through this snack. And we are going to see some interesting insights from the local level youth work and trying to understand what are the links between local and European levels throughout this whole spring. Today is the third talk from the series, and we are very, very happy that we have with us here Dragan Atanasov to talk about local youth work in towns and in a region neighboring the European Union in Western Balkans. What is the key to an efficient youth work strategy in a mid-sized town? What do you need to take into account, and how can you get all the stakeholders on board so nobody feels left out and everybody feels that they could invest and bring more to the table? We will discuss this important topic together with Dragan. Dragan is coming from the Republic of North Macedonia, joining us, as some of you could guess from the song, from Skopje. He's a trainer, a fellow colleague, a researcher, an evaluator, and an author specialized in youth work recognition, youth policy, cultural diversity, and community development with over 15 years of experience. And he has actually started out at the local level that he will tell us about. And currently, he's also using his expertise to support the municipal youth centers in North Macedonia, as well as co-coordinating the Europe Goes Local in the Western Balkans. It is my really big pleasure to pass this floor now to a very good colleague, to Dragan, to share with us today on the youth work, local youth work at municipal level. Dragan, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Anna, and hello, everyone. I am very happy to see a full room of participants today with us. Thanks also to the rest of the team, to Maria, Judith, and the other Maria, and everyone else for inviting me. It's my great pleasure to be with you here today as part of this really legendary online activity that's been happening for 5 years now. And I've known, of course, about the ID Talk since 2020, but it's really a privilege to be part of one episode. So I'm happy for that, and I hope this talk will be useful for all of you. As Anna already mentioned, we'll talk about the reality of youth work in mid-sized towns, cities, policy, and also provision, so how to ensure good quality offer of youth work to young people, and what kind of collaboration, what kind of policies are needed for that, and also talking about some challenges and some success factors that can contribute for that. I can speak from my own experience, having worked with some municipalities in North Macedonia, having worked in my hometown as well. And I'll start with this personal story about how I got involved in the field. And it's very strongly connected to my hometown and with the first youth center that existed there some time ago. And then also through my experience of working with more municipalities from the other countries in the region. And I'm happy that I see some of the municipalities and also some of the EGL advisors, mentors that work with those municipalities together with us here today. So without any further ado, because we are also limited with time, I would like to share the screen. Just give me a minute for that. I have a PowerPoint presentation, which is actually, it doesn't have much text because I would like to keep the focus on us talking and being able to share more than really to follow what is on the slides. But you'll be able to follow on the PowerPoint presentation the main key points of what I'm going to talk about. Starting with a bit about myself. Already Anna said very big words, and it already made me a bit uncomfortable with all the superlatives that she used for myself, but a bit more personal, maybe, introduction. So I joined for the first time the local youth center when I was 15. It was in my hometown. You'll see a picture of my hometown very soon. And I started volunteering there, learning in different non-formal educational activities. Typical story, I think, of many of us that are now in the youth field, in the youth work field. And then when I was 18, 19, I got more involved volunteering in more local youth organizations. And then I really can say that I'm part of the youth work field since 2007, because this is when me and a few other colleagues and friends at that time, we established a youth organization, and we started implementing different activities locally, and then through the youth and youth in action programs, also internationally. In 2009, we established a youth center in my hometown, and then another one in Skopje. And I remained very much involved on the local level until, together with some other colleagues from other organizations in the country, we established a network, which I'll also tell you a bit about a bit later, more about. It's called Union for Youth Work. And there I stayed as a Secretary General for 4 years. Nowadays, besides being, as Anna mentioned, trainer, researcher sometimes in the field of youth work, I am also acting as a president of AIVA, which stands for Alliance of Youth Workers Associations. It's a European level network of national associations of youth workers. So at the moment we are 10 national associations joined together. And it's a new network since last year. So I'm mainly involved there nowadays, and as well as a co-coordinator of the Europe Goes Local program in the Western Balkans for South to Southeast Europe. And probably those of you that were present 2 weeks ago, two talks ago, actually, probably already heard about EGL from my colleague Judith. And anyway, I think most people in the field know about EGL by now, so I think there is no need to really say a lot about EGL, but I have the privilege to work in the Western Balkans with a network of 12 municipalities coming from Albania, Montenegro, Kosovo, and Bosnia, and with 6, 7 experts in the field of youth work in the region who are working with the municipalities in an advising role. And at the end, I'll tell you more about youth work on the local level in the Western Balkans. But I wanted to start by showing you a photo of my hometown. It's called Kavadarci, and it's in the wine region in North Macedonia. It's famous for many local wineries and many vineyards. It's very green part. It's what you would go really as kind of mid-sized town or a city, if you like, in my country, which is not very large anyway. It has about 40,000 people. So I think for the purpose of this talk about youth work on the local level in a mid-sized town on the local level, I think it fits well, actually, what the context fits well, and I think we can use it as an example. So I grew up in this town, and as I mentioned, there was a youth center there that I joined when I was 15, 16 years old. And it was a UNICEF-funded project. The youth center was called Babylon. It was part of 23 local youth centers in 23 communities in the country. And it was a typical youth club where you could attend non-formal educational activities. You could also spend your free time. You could volunteer. You could become member of debate club or different other clubs. And this is where I first encountered non-formal education and youth work. And I stayed there for a while. I stayed there for a few years. I volunteered my high school years. This is where I made my friends, and this is where I learned English, and I learned about the youth program at that time of the European Commission. So kind of many first things happened there. And then the youth center closed. It closed because the funding stopped. So it was a project-based youth center for a while. UNICEF was funding it, then the World Bank took over through a different project. And then, I was 18, I didn't understand much, but I understood that we are supposed to find local funding, and that the organization that was managing the project didn't manage to find local funding, and then the youth center closed. And it was very sad, actually, because I wanted other friends and young people, and also those younger than me, to experience what I experienced during the first years of my involvement in non-formal education. So with few friends, we started an organization, youth organization, in 2007. And then we started working locally. And one of the first things we did was in 2009, we opened a youth center, because we wanted to provide the same opportunity to other young people. And I'm not sure how we managed at that time, because we didn't have money. We just had a lot of enthusiasm and this youthful energy when you're 20, 21, and when you think you can change the world. So we somehow sustained this youth center for some years. And the next picture is from my, as Maria said, young Dragan. So this is me. I think this is from 2010 with one of our volunteers. PlayStation, probably at this time. I tried to find pictures from before, but I grew up in the time before the internet was was big, and before social media. So this is like as far back as I can go. But this youth center, we managed to sustain it for about 10 years through different projects, different donations, local support, etc. By the time when we realized that actually, if we don't create a sustainable model for local youth work on the local level, this youth center will also collapse. And there were a few other youth centers in the country that were facing the same situation. They were run based on the volunteering efforts and the enthusiasm of many people who believed in what we were doing, who believed in youth work, but who knew that this was not going to stay forever, because at some point we would have to move on, or funding would stop, and then youth work services, something that we've been building on for some years, would actually cease to exist. So then we joined forces, and we united with few other organizations, with few other colleagues, to create national association of youth workers and youth work providers, a national network, which was created in 2013. And altogether, we decided to lobby for youth work recognition and youth work services on the national and on the local level in North Macedonia. And it took some 7-8 years until we managed to pass national legislation to introduce a responsibility for local municipalities to fund youth centers. And I was very fortunate that my municipality, my hometown, was actually the first one that implemented the new legislation. When the new law was passed in 2020, we took the law and we went to the city, to the mayor, and said, look, there is this law, which was actually, worth 5 years of lobbying and advocacy work, more or less, and back and forth, going with the legislation. But basically, we had the law, and we asked the city to support, to actually implement what they were supposed to, and then to fund the youth center. And they agreed. And then with the support also of the National Agency for Youth and Sport, they established a youth center. And the way the system works in North Macedonia is that the municipality has the responsibility to formally establish a youth center, to provide the space and to provide funding for a youth center. And then it needs to publish an open call for an organization or a consortium of organizations that would like to manage the youth center on behalf of the city. And our municipality published such a call. And then we, together with the organization that ran the first youth center that I joined, so jointly, because that organization still existed when this was happening. So together we joined forces, we submitted an application together, and we were chosen by the municipality to manage the youth center on their behalf. So in 2021, the youth center was open. And here is a picture of some of the activities from last year that the youth center did. So it was a full circle, something that started more than 20 years ago, with uncertain, unstable funding, something that was interrupted. And now the full circle meant that the same work continued in a more sustainable way, because the our organization signed an agreement with the municipality to manage for the youth center. The municipality provided funding. We were able to employ youth workers. We were able to invest in training and education of youth workers. And we were able to start more sustainable programs and more quality, to work more on the quality provision of youth work in the country. So I want to take you through a bit of how this was achieved and how this was done as an example. Because I think we can learn from this experience, and we can learn from the positives, but then we can also learn from the challenges, because not everything works well, also in my hometown, but also in many other, I think, municipalities, not only in our region, but also elsewhere in Europe. So if I need to do a summary of youth work in my hometown nowadays, as I said, firstly, the first public youth center in the country was established there. The municipality provides an annual public funding for the program of the youth center, which is not a lot, but it's also not little for our conditions in North Macedonia. We started with 10,000 euros per year that the municipality is putting in the youth center, in addition to the space, in addition to like electricity and internet and other utilities. 10,000 euros was just for the annual program of the youth center. And now, last year, that increased to almost 14,000 euros. So we managed, and the municipality managed to increase by 40% the annual funding, and hopefully this would grow. There is also a local youth council that is established, which functions somewhat successfully. So in some ways it works, in other ways it doesn't. And we as a youth center, we try to work a lot with them. So we try to engage the local youth council in projects and activities, especially in consultations, especially in any kind of activities that have to do with participation, with policy development, with volunteering programs, etc. The municipality also has project fund that is provided to civil society organizations, not a special one for youth projects, but youth projects can be funded through it. And also there are few larger cooperation projects between the municipality and the local organizations. I think that's a good practice that can be shared from my experience. Basically, the organizations applying together in partnership with the city to do a bit larger scale, more comprehensive cooperation projects, some of them happening on a national level, including more municipalities. And we've partnered with the city quite a lot in this way, that we jointly ask for funding and develop projects. There is no local youth strategy at the moment, but there is one in preparation. And this was also a process that had its ups and downs, because it is not always, I think, easy to do participatory processes for development of policy documents, especially on the local level. And now I think the city hired somebody who conducted focus groups with young people and with the city and with youth organizations to go through the process and to come up with one document. So that's a bit of a summary of what is happening. I would say maybe in the eyes of somebody coming from countries where we have a longer history of youth work and provision of youth services, it doesn't sound like a lot. For us, it's a lot, because 5 years ago, none of this actually existed. And I want to tell you how we got into this, how we managed to have what we have at the moment in my hometown, because in our context, you would consider it as a success. Again, we go back to the challenges and the difficult aspects a bit later. But I want to start with the keys to success, because for 10 years now, I've been involved in advocating and lobbying for youth work on the national level, and also on the local level. And now recently, since a few years ago, together with the other national associations of youth workers, and also especially through the Europe Goes Local program in the Western Balkans, I am more or less familiar with what is happening also in other European countries. Based on that, I think I can talk about what we need to keep in mind so that we are able to provide sustainable, good quality youth work services on the local level. And in my example, at least, it starts with national policies. And I think in many countries, is similar in the way that even though youth work happens on the local level. And even though municipalities are those that should be first in the line to support, for example, youth clubs, youth centers, street youth work, or funding for youth projects, very often there is a need for supportive national policies or basically strategies, laws, action plans, and other policy documents, which will provide, on the one hand, the grounds for local authorities to act in the field of youth and youth work, but then also, on the other hand, the obligation, the responsibility, because very often, municipalities will not proactively engage in providing youth work funding and structures. Sometimes because of lack of funds, and we'll talk about this later, sometimes because of having different priorities, sometimes because of lack of understanding and lack of awareness of why youth work is important and what's the benefit of it. So what we found helpful in our case is really making sure, before we go to local authorities, that we work on establishing this national policy national framework in which youth work could be developed. And I want to give you a comparison of what was achieved and what helped to get a local youth club in a very small town. So when we started working all together in the National Association of Youth Work Providers in 2018, none of this existed. So formal recognition of youth work did not exist in the country. And I think it's still the case in many countries, unfortunately, that youth work is not formally recognized. Then there was no competency framework of a youth worker. Nobody really knew what are the skills, the knowledge, the abilities that youth workers should have, and who is a youth worker, basically. So who should be able to, who should be allowed in a way to also work with young people in the youth work context. There were no quality standards for youth work. There were no quality standards for non-formal educational programs for young people. Youth work was not recognized as an occupation. It was not recognized as a profession. There was no certified vocational training for youth workers. There was no formal education for youth workers. And for youth centers, there were no quality standards. So basically, youth work was developing in different municipalities in different directions, mainly depending on what projects were available and what were the skills and the abilities of the people in the local context. After 4 or 5 years of acting together, we managed to have most of this accomplished. So now most of this already exists in North Macedonia. Since 2020, youth work is formally recognized. Then also there is a framework, which is the youth worker portfolio. There are quality standards for youth work, which were created together with the National Agency for Youth. Youth work is recognized as an occupation, not yet as a profession, so that's something to still work on. However, based on the occupational standard of a youth worker, there is a certified vocational training for youth workers. There is also master's programs for youth work, and there are quality standards for youth workers, for youth centers, and there is also a system to ensure, to assess the quality standards. So we have last year piloted a national system for assessing the quality of youth workers and for improving their work. And one of the key aspects, developments that helped all of this to come true was actually the joint advocating for youth work on the national level. So as I mentioned, in 2013, we established what we call Union for Youth Work. And you see the logo and the name in Macedonian language of the association, which is a national umbrella organization now consisted of, I think, 16 organizations providing youth work. And there are such bodies in different European countries. There is one in Serbia, which is a great partner of ours. It's called NAPOR. Now, recently, one was established in Montenegro as an alliance or association of youth workers. There are ones in Italy, in Greece, in Estonia, in Czech Republic, in other European countries. And I mentioned that on the European level, we're also united. So what I found very strongly supporting the policy development on the national level in the field of youth and youth work was this joint advocacy, lobbying for youth work. Because if you're one, because we've tried to lobby for public funding for youth work. We tried to lobby for local strategies for youth work independently. but you are much stronger when you approach authorities, when you work with the policymakers. If you are together, if you are a group of organizations or individuals that share the same priorities and that share the same work for the same objectives. And again, it takes time. So in our case, in North Macedonia, it really took about 5-6 years of joint work on talking with stakeholders, talking among ourselves, and making sure, proposing legislation and lobbying for that legislation to be adopted. So what I can really advocate for is establishing such national organizations, or if not, then at least working informally together within the youth work sector. Another key to success in our case, at least, was using European policies and European developments in the field of youth and youth work. And I think most of us here are probably aware of the fact that there is a very strong momentum for youth work on the European level. And it's not new, it's since a few years ago. I would even say maybe it's since the last European Youth Work Convention. European conventions are these big, large events that are happening once in 5 years, and we have the next one happening in Malta in May. But the previous one was almost 5 years ago, or 4.5 years ago. It was supposed to be in Germany, but because of the COVID pandemic, it happened online. And it really pushed a lot of developments in the European youth work field. European youth work agenda originated from there. But then if we look back, even further back, there is the Council of Europe recommendation for youth work. There is the European Union Youth Strategy that lists youth work as in one of the pillars. There is also the Council of Europe 2030 Youth Strategy. So a lot of policy documents on the European level that you can refer to. There is a new declaration since last year, a new resolution of the European Union, which is called informally, or the resolution is called Youth Work in New Europe. It has a longer title, but you can browse it in this way. And it's really, all these policies provide you the grounds for advocating on the national and local level. And we did a lot of this in North Macedonia. We basically took these European policy documents and went to the authorities and said, this is something we need to implement on the local level. And I would encourage you to do the same, and to see how those documents are relevant for the local and the national context. And also not to forget big cooperation projects like Europe Goes Local, which also has the charter, which is something that is really relevant for the local youth work. And the charter itself is translated in many documents. It's like 5-6 pages, very short document that can be really taken to the local context. So not to forget that there are European policies which sometimes seem very distant, especially if you work on the local level. If you are working in the local municipality, in a local youth club, you think, what does this European Union Council resolution have to do with me? Or what this bond process or European Youth Work agenda, how it impacts my work? It does because European policies, and now I move to the next slide, which says bridging European, national, and local levels. So European policies impact national ones, and those impact local levels. And it is often the responsibility of somebody on the local level, and in many cases, it should be somebody from the youth work field who would try to bridge the gap and to try to explain to the local stakeholders, meaning everyone from the young people that attend the activities in the youth club, to the youth worker who works in a small rural community and in a small town, to the authorities in the city or in the national policy-making bodies, to really explain how this ripples down, and how, for example, what the Council of Europe, in our case, has recommended to the member states should be taken by the national authorities. So I think we won a lot of support on the national level by just saying we are members of the Council of Europe, and the Council of Europe has recommended our government to do this, and our government has ratified, or our parliament has ratified the recommendation. So you have taken the formal responsibility to do it. And often the authorities, and I know we have also representatives here from local and national authorities as well, but the facts are that often the authorities will not willingly implement a policy if somebody doesn't remind them to do it, if somebody doesn't explain to them what the needs are for that and how it is relevant, because there are so many policies, so many recommendations. So it's difficult to prioritize. And it's really the task of us as youth workers, and as well supported by young people, to lobby for those policies to be implemented locally. And then something that is very big recently is demonstrating impact of youth work. And there are few European projects, few European corporations going in these directions, trying to find ways to to take what we know informally from other anecdotes, that is the value of youth work, and really to translate it into indicators, into numbers, into funds, into money, if you want. Because sometimes the city in a small community needs to understand why it makes sense to invest 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 euros to youth work, and how much that would save them from in the future. How much, for example, supporting young people's positive development of skills, helping them find jobs, helping them stay off the streets, how much that would help the city save money in the future, because they will not have to invest in rehabilitation programs. So what is the value of acting proactively and investing in youth work? And I think nowadays it's even more important, having in mind how the priorities have shifted and how Europe is facing new challenges. I think that in a way, the pressure is again on the field of youth work to show, to demonstrate, to prove what the impact of our work is. And I know it can be frustrating, but again, there are partnerships, there are projects, and you can contact me if you want to know more. Our colleagues again from Serbia, Napor, they invested the last 4 or 5 years developing mechanisms, tools that can be used locally to demonstrate how youth work is effective. And we would be very happy to share those results. And then something also important is to working together with stakeholders from different sectors, from different fields. In our case, and I think also in other examples of positive examples of youth work development locally, what we've seen was the strength, the value of working together between civil society or the youth sector with the public authorities, with the formal education sector, with social services, with the business sector. So when we established the youth center in my hometown, part of the funding came from the city, but part came from the local companies that donated, chairs or a smart board or chess tables or ping pong board. And then, all of this together helped for a successful story. So really tapping into other sectors. And this is also something that is part of the European Youth Work Agenda. Is one of the priorities, one of the key thematic areas is working together with different sectors. Because our field, the youth work sector, is so small and not necessarily rich, so that we have to, I think, and there is also value of working cross-sectorially, because different experiences, different practices, and different strengths are brought from different sectors. And then building sustainable models. And I think this is something that is essential, because my experience has shown that models that are based on shorter term results, project funds, plans for a year or two, dependence on especially international donors, are not sustainable. And we've seen, I think, all of us just a few weeks ago, what happened with the USAID funding. How it was, maybe it did not impact all the countries equally, but in my part of the world, in the Western Balkans, and I think also in Eastern Europe and in other regions of the world, like overnight, many projects, many organizations were closed because they depended on USAID funding. Like the biggest youth organization in North Macedonia basically stopped existing overnight because of this dependence. So I think we have to look for sustainable models. And in our case, when we lobbied for national legislation for youth work, we really thought a lot of how local youth centers could be sustainable. And we knew, or we concluded together with the local authorities, that a sustainable model would be where the city provides the basic minimum funding, but then it gives the youth center to the youth organizations who will probably have the incentive to look for more funding and to provide more projects and find more youth workers to keep investing in the youth center. And I think it's proven for now to be sustainable because they exist for 4 years now. We'll see how it goes in the future. But I think really the key is finding maybe not something that is, you could probably find funding to employ 10 people and, buy 3D printers and do this very, very high level youth work. But if it exists for 1 year or 2 years, in my opinion, it doesn't make sense. It's better to start with something that is sustainable in the long run, even if it means less resources, less fancy equipment, less staff for the beginning, and then grow it from there. Now, speaking of some challenges also from our experience, and they're very closely related in some aspects, like the two sides of the coin connected to the success stories. And one of them, I think I've seen it quite a lot, and all of us can witness it nowadays, that young people in youth work are not really a priority and are becoming, unfortunately, even less of a priority in many countries. And we just saw, for example, last year, funding being cut in Finland for youth centers. We saw years before funding being cut from youth work in Ireland, in the United Kingdom, in England. And now we see even more. And I think we have to keep working with the local authorities and with everyone also to ensure how and why young people should be a priority, and why youth work services, even nowadays, when again funding is going from education and culture and youth to defense and military, we should be able to prove why young people should remain a priority and why working with them should remain a priority. Not to solve a problem, so not to see youth work and not to see the youth clubs and youth centers as instruments for solving a certain acute danger, like very often it is seen. I'm long enough in this field to see how, for example, even the European programs are shifting focus from inclusion to suddenly unemployment to fighting, what was the term even, fighting a radical radicalization, violent radicalization of young people. So how, based on the problems that Europe and also the national and local governments are seeing, how youth work is being shifted in different directions. What I mean by saying young people in youth work should be a priority is by itself. So not as a means for an end, but really as youth work having the value in itself to support proactively young people's positive development as individuals in the society. Another obvious challenge is lack of funds and project-based funding. Project-based funding in the way that very often programs and projects for youth work provision on the local level are dependent on, as I said, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year projects, then they end and that's it. And funds are never enough, as we know, and part of my job for 5 years as a Secretary General of the National Association in North Macedonia was going from one municipality to another and convincing them that part of the money should go into youth centers. And it's not always easy. So some mayors and some city councils are very supportive of the idea. But then I will always recall an encounter with a mayor who, after listening carefully to us for about an hour, he asked, so how much this would cost me? We said, well, at least 10,000, 15,000 euros a year. And then he said, with this money, I can pave 2 streets in my hometown, in my town. Like, why would I spend this much money on youth center where I can make, 2 neighborhoods happy? And what I've learned is that it's not only the lack of funds, but how funds are used. So local authorities would always prioritize something else, maybe instead of funding a youth club and youth center. And this ties back to the impact and how we show the impact and the value of what you're doing and importance of local youth work. But then also to take part of the responsibility on ourselves, thinking from the position of the youth work sector. Also, often the challenge is, I think, in the lack of preparedness, lack of unity within the youth work sector and the youth sector, because often organizations will have diverse ideas, diverse visions. They would compete for funds. They would compete for their vision of how a youth club or youth center would work, or they would simply not be prepared to take on the responsibility to support the local authorities in providing local youth work. And in our case, an example of what worked well was that we worked quite a lot to convince local organizations to apply to run youth centers together. So not to compete for the youth center, but really, if the city is opening a youth center, we would encourage 2, 3, 4 organizations, sometimes even, to jointly put together forces, knowledge, resources, to submit an application together and to manage the youth center on behalf of the city all together as a community. In many countries, also from the region, youth work is not formally recognized and regulated, and this is a challenge because just in North Macedonia, let's say, because of the fact that youth worker does not exist as a profession yet, the municipalities would not be able to employ youth workers yet formally because the system does not recognize youth workers. So the way we solved it was through giving the youth center to the organizations and asking organizations to employ youth workers, because in that way it was possible. So you have to see if youth work does not have the proper formal recognition, then you either have to, or in the same time in parallel, you have to work on making sure youth work is recognized on the national level, but at the same time finding the way how to manage within the state in which you are managing, because especially policy development on the national level can take a long time, and then you have to be able to manage and have success on the local level even before let's say youth work is formal, gains the formal recognition that it needs. Often I see lack of understanding and trust of other sectors. Youth work is often a small sector, not really known to the others. In our case, in North Macedonia, we were also the new kids on the block in a way. So suddenly, youth center appeared out of nowhere. And when we would approach the schools or the police or the Center for Social Work, they would say, "Who are you? Like, are you another project? Are you another organization? Who sent you?" And then, we would always have to say, "No, we are actually part of the city. It's a new institution. This is what we do." So, starting from what the youth center is and why it exists. We work a lot on the local level, bridging those gaps between even the police, for example. So we communicate with the police to act together in some situations where we see certain challenges for young people on the local level. We invite the police to for example, come and to do a bit of preventive work, bridge the gap with the education, formal education, which is also seeing like this non-formal education sector, all often with a bit of distrust. And I think it's to a certain extent understandable because frankly, often we ourselves from the field, we don't have clear understanding of what we are doing and what the others are doing in the same field. So I think it's not a surprise that other sectors would need a bit more introduction to youth work and youth work services. Often also challenges the involvement of young people. We see many municipalities of towns saying, young people are not interested. They don't want to go. We opened this youth center and now it's empty. Like, why don't they come back? Why don't they show up? And then we would ask, the city, like, how did you inform young people that there is a youth club opened? And then they would say, we published information on our website. Like, who is now checking? Like, where are young people? Who of the young people are checking websites nowadays? And not even, Facebook. So if we want young people to be involved and engaged and interested, we also have to stay a bit up to date and to see who are young people of today and how to approach them and how they want to participate. So this lack of involvement, it's always, I think, taking the perspective of lack of motivation and interest of young people to participate. But then I would now want to challenge all of us to think how we create environment in which young people are interested to participate in an era in which they live in a digital world very much. They live in a very globalized community. They participate in more alternative ways, like they would buy a T-shirt with us, or they would put, badge, and this is the involvement and participation in the eyes of many young people. So how do we remain interested and attractive to young people so that they are involved? No follow-up to policy. Often what I see is that youth policy would be adopted, but then there is no action plan, there is no budget, there is no follow-up. And then young people lose interest and they lose trust in authorities because they say, okay, what if we have a strategy if nothing happens? What if there are priorities if there is no money to work on them? So I think a positive example would be when the city, again, would transfer part of the responsibility or would work jointly with the local youth organizations to make sure that those policies are implemented, because there needs to be a follow-up. Often these kind of strategic plans are lost, forgotten, in some office, and nobody looks at them. So I would advocate for concrete, specific follow-up. And then something I think we are still learning, and we need to learn, is that youth work and youth policy should not exist in isolation, but it should be a horizontal policy area, incorporated in different sectors of the different dimensions of policy. So, for example, youth issues, I don't think they should only be addressed in a local youth strategy or a local youth action plan, but they should find this way also in the local education strategy, in the local sports plan, in the local housing plan, because young people have needs and challenges and problems and interests which have to do with a lot of different areas. I think it's very wrong when we think that young people, through youth councils and organizations, should be able to say what they think about the youth strategy and youth policy, but when it comes to like infrastructure, that they shouldn't, or when it comes to taxes, they shouldn't, because we should not forget that young people are also citizens, and what happens in the city, it affects them also outside of the very narrow field of youth policy. So just to sum up this part of the current state of youth work in North Macedonia, we have 10 municipal public youth centers now that are funded by the cities. We have 2 accredited vocational programs for youth workers. Through them, 45 youth workers have been certified and recognized by the state through the vocational training programs. We have 1 accredited master studies program for youth workers at the Faculty of Philosophy and 2 master students. So progress is slow. I'm showing these numbers because they are not very big numbers. And it's just to bring awareness that change, especially, and development, especially in this field, takes a lot of time, even in a small country like my own, where people know each other and where little money can make a big difference. So out of 80 municipalities, only 10 of them have managed to establish youth centers, and only 40 youth workers are created. But starting from 0, it's a big progress, and I'm very happy that I can share this progress in other countries. I mean, I can share that other countries from the region also have similar progress. So for the last few minutes before I end, I want to share a bit more about the other Western Balkan countries. And I think at this point, I would also stop sharing, because I also want to see your faces, at least those that are sharing cameras. So as I said, I work with the region and the municipalities from the region through the Europe Goals Local program. And again, I'm very happy that I see few of you here. And I invite you later to share also a bit from your experience. But also the whole region is moving towards more recognition of youth work. So Albania, for example, is a country that is probably way forward, even compared to North Macedonia, some examples. Because many municipalities are investing, even without having national legislation, they are investing local resources and funds to establish youth centers. And what is interesting, I think, in Albania is that some youth centers take one form, others take different forms. So in some cases, the city itself will establish the youth center and employ youth workers. In others, they provide the building and they partner with local youth organizations to provide activities for young people. And now Albania is very close to adopting national policy that is formally that will formally recognize youth work and youth workers. And I can invite some, I think, colleagues from Albania here present. They can share a little bit more. But then we also have, for example, Bosnia, Teslić Duško is here. They have a youth center for, I think, 3-4 years now, that is also providing activities for young people on the local level, and providing also youth work, youth funding, youth projects to groups, informal even groups of young people. And again, without having the proper legislation. Podgorica from Montenegro, I mean, without having the legislation on the national level. Podgorica is another example in Montenegro, the capital of Montenegro. A city has established few different youth clubs, which are in their case thematic youth clubs. So they decide that one youth club would work, for example, more on employment, another youth club more on creativity, and they target young people not so much geographically, but more like to involve young people to different spaces, youth spaces, depending on their interests. Pristina, I think Aisha, I saw earlier here, Pristina is also from Kosovo, going in the direction of more providing youth centers. So the whole topic of youth spaces and youth environments, supportive youth clubs, youth centers, is quite trendy in the region. And I think the rest of the continent can learn a lot from the small countries with very limited funding. I think, just to sum up in 1 minute, what I think works very well is not getting stuck to one model, because obviously there are different ways in which youth work can be provided on the local level. So I shared the example from my town, but even if I look at North Macedonia, in every town, the approach towards providing youth work has taken a bit of different direction. And also what we see in Teslic, what we see in Shkodra, what we see in Podgorica, in Pristina, it takes different shapes depending on the local context, utilizing in the best way possible the local resources. And connected to this is the next point, which is working together with the sectors, the different sectors, mainly civil society and public authorities. Because very often the case is that the local authorities have the power, have the means, the resources, the capabilities, but then local youth organizations have the knowledge, have the skills to work with young people. And a kind of winning combination is if you combine those two together, and if they work together jointly to make sure that the models that are being implemented are sustainable. And this is where I come to the last point, which is, I think I already shared it before, is thinking of sustainable scenarios. And when I talk to representatives of different municipalities, they often ask, like, how to do it, what is the best way? And then my answer is, what works for you the best? If you have a strong local youth center established by one local youth organization, there is no need for the municipality to create another youth center. That would be a competition of the existing one. You can direct the funding, you can direct the resources, the support to that one. Or if you don't have anything, but you have a strong civil society, strong civil youth organizations, you can bring those organizations together and then work jointly to establish a new place. So really, like, where maybe sometimes the knowledge, even the human resources is centered in the municipality in the form of municipal employee that has background in youth work, background in the youth field. Sometimes it will be in the civil society. So really developing models that will work on the long run and that utilize the best that the local community has to offer. Because I think the reality at the end of the day is that many of these small towns, mid-sized towns, have very limited funding and often have to choose and prioritize what they focus on. But also, my experience has shown that those towns are often the ones that are much more prepared to invest their limited resources in youth work compared to bigger cities. And I don't know if that's the case in other countries, but in our region, very often you see smaller town with very humble, very modest budget that is ready to invest more because they can see the value of investing, working with their young citizens, because the impact will be more visible. And we are going back again to the story of impact and why it is then important when you develop a model that functions like this to also show what the value is of having that service. So I would like to stop here. I think maybe I took a bit more time than planned.
It's okay.
I hope it's okay, Anna, still.
That's fine. That's fine. You were like this close that I would stop you, but you stopped yourself, so that's fine. Thank you so much, Dragan. It was so engaging and it was so structured that it was also almost impossible to kind of, there was nothing extra to stop. So no worries there. We are still online, by the way. We are still broadcasting on Facebook. And while we are still online, there are two questions that I wanted to address before we start engaging more with our room here. One question is from the chat, And one question is from our Salto Inclusion and Diversity team. Yeah, because as our name shows, our main stake in the program generally is inclusion and diversity. So inclusive and diversity sensitive youth work. So one short question will be, how do you, if ever, mainstream inclusion and diversity sensitivity in local youth work, and particularly in local youth work policies? Yeah, what to do or how to make sure that young people are not left behind? Because a bit of a context to the question, because in sensitive or in resource scarce society, we are very much up to quick results and kind of one size fit all approach. So we put one youth center out there, we tick the box that we've done our duty towards young people. But how to be sure that these spaces or these services or these programs that the local level offers are accessible and also diversity sensitive? So this would be a question from us. And another question is coming actually from one of our most active today participants, from Badahir. He is agreeing with you that it is really important, this cooperation between city and local organization, especially on like bigger projects. But how do you get them in? And so how do you engage them? And what is the buy-in for the municipalities? How do you convince them that this cooperation is mutually beneficial? So once you answer these two questions, I will see if maybe we have more. Otherwise, then we give the floor to the audience here.
Thank you, Anna, and really thanks for reminding me of that aspect. It's important, and I didn't talk a lot about inclusion. It is actually working with young people with fewer opportunities. Inclusion work is in North Macedonia part of the quality standards for youth work. So one of the quality criteria is that the youth center provides youth work services that are adjusted to the needs of different young people with different abilities, and that sometimes means that can mean everything from the space being physically accessible to the programs being adapted to different needs of young people who are in some ways marginalized or disadvantaged. And I can give you an example of a program that our youth center is developing together with the municipality. And then this ties to the other question that you asked, Anna. So we are now developing a 2-year program for supporting young people from marginalized communities to find employment. And this is a program which employs a social worker and a psychologist who provide 2-month counseling, career counseling, and life skills development to young people who are both unemployed and who belong to one of the marginalized groups in the local community. And then also the program also provides internship opportunities for them, paid internship. It provides paid courses, and it supports them to find eventual employment. So how do you bring the town in the local authorities into something like this? By showing them what the value is and what the benefit is for them. So if the city has a group of young people who are finding it difficult to get employed and who are not competitive enough in the labor market, obviously this is a challenge for the local authorities. So in this case, this project is developed together between the city, the government, and the youth center that have basically a partners in the project, and very often they jointly work together to identify those young people and to involve them. So for example, when there is a new call for young people to join for a new group in this career counseling and internship program, the mayor of the city is sharing the call on his personal Facebook profile. So small things like this, and inviting local young people to attend. And I think this helps because often there is kind of mistrust into this kind of non-governmental programs, non-profit organizations. So if the recognition comes from the city and from the local authorities, it helps to show why those programs are available. And again, going back to the city, I think it's a key to have them interested and to make sure that they are that they see the benefit of working, especially with the most marginalized groups in the community. Our experience has shown that often it is those young people that have the least opportunities that they are interested in the activities offered by youth centers. However, we need to not forget that we need to create safe space for them and a welcoming environment, because the other side of the medal is that what happens often with, especially with international programs, is that we see the same young people, those that are already involved, already participating, already interested, keep participating and keep coming back in different programs, in different formats, in different activities. So the key is really how to reach out to those that are often left behind, and that requires not publishing news on Facebook or a website or in a group where opportunities for young people are published, because those that will read are those that are already privileged, that have a smartphone and internet access, and that follow groups where these kind of opportunities are published. So what is required often is working together with social workers, with the city, with schools, to really identify and to target, to reach out to those that are most in need.
Thank you very much. I have a feeling that we are very good to go in this bigger group, because our group is really not so huge, and also the time pressure is they're a little bit still 20 minutes away. So what we would suggest now is that you could actually either put a question or comment or example in the chat for us to come to it, or you can also raise a hand using the function on Zoom and take the floor. We would be particularly interested in questions that are very relevant to today's input. So municipal youth work, mid-sized cities, places and context in which maybe youth policy, local youth work policy is not so well developed. But again, whatever you want to share, maybe say, please just be mindful of time and give space to the others as well. So I see one hand so far, it's from Badahir. And then maybe this gives you a minute to also think what are your questions and your comments. Yes, please.
Hi there, Anna. I just, well, I mean, it's a little way of it's just losing it. We're getting better, but one of the main aspects the problems that we have is that, like, not reaching the governor or not reaching the mayor for projects and the rest of the stuff to explain. There's a city council, we're there also, tourism development agency, we are there too. But what we suffered, it's changing this year, but we suffered is that there are some, I don't know, key personnel located around these guys. And, you cannot pass them through to get to the main person. That could be because they love their pocket so much, or it could be policies and politics involved and stuff. So I mean, we had a gastronomical house here. We discussed it with the university and the mayor, and everything was okay. I even did the feasibility plans and everything. Then there was some money needed to be spent to the repair of the area, and we tried to follow up, and we couldn't even get in touch with the mayor anymore. Obviously, we stepped on some toes there, and they just cut our communication with the main person that we needed to talk. Now this year, hopefully it gets better, because our president of the university, governor, and the mayor has all changed, and they're working with each other regardless of politics. But how do you folks maneuver around this when you meet like secondary or third degree person is actually being a burden to you to get to where you want to go? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted to intervene here before you say something, Dragan, because you said we have in our audience representatives for municipalities. So maybe you can give us an answer to the question of Bader. How do you make sure that youth voices and youth work voices actually get to the decision makers, yeah, to city councils, to mayors, to governors. What are some of the good practices that you have used in the past? So if any of you would like to answer this question, we can take it instead of Dragan, but if nobody, then we can definitely revert this question to Dragan. Since you are already here, you kind of speak on behalf of all municipalities of the world, so please take it up.
Well, I can just say a small sentence there. How we do it, I don't know how effective is that, but how we do it, when we go to the openings and the exhibitions and stuff, over there we directly attack to the main person, we catch him there, the others cannot stop us. But I don't know how far you can go with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bader. Maybe in the chat you can mention your municipality and your country. In the meantime, maybe let's listen to the perspective of municipalities, yeah? Is this intimidation tactics on public events really working? Or maybe there are some things that we can do ourselves to reach better the decision makers. What is your take on this? Please, if anybody, just raise a hand, unmute yourselves. If not, then maybe Dragan, you could take the floor and speak on behalf of those municipalities maybe that you have been successfully cooperating with.
You know, what I found that it works is working with, I think, Bahadur, you mentioned this second, third level of officers in the municipality. You know, the mayors, they don't make all the decisions in my experience. And maybe Aisha or Tanushi or Dushko, those that are in the, here from municipalities can share a bit from your experience. In our case, we saw that finding an ally in the municipality, whether it's in the youth department, in the education department, a city councillor, member of the local employee in the local authorities in some way, helps a lot, because then those are the ones that can find opportunities to push for either policy or provision of youth work on the local level. Because once you can get a meeting with the mayor for half an hour, and then you would explain, even in the most elaborate way, why youth work is important. But then at the end of the day, the mayor will go back to their his councillors, her councillors, or would go back to their advisors and say, what do you think about this? So I think my experience shows that you want an advisor, or you want a city council member that knows what you're talking about. So that when the mayor goes to them, says, what do you think? That they would say, yeah, we think our experience shows that this is a good direction. And really, in our cases, it has helped that we would work proactively for even a few years with those officers in the city, to invite them in events, sometimes even to engage them in, you do panel discussion, invite them to talk. You do a seminar or a kind of training for youth workers, you invite them to take part in. You do a consultation with young people, you invite them so they become sensitized of the topic. And then once you have, I think, the support inside, then it's easier to lobby at the higher levels. That's my experience, but maybe others here, especially from municipalities, will say something more valuable.
Yes, Dragan, thank you so much for talking about it. Maybe linking back to EGL as a program, it is also sometimes very helpful that representatives of municipalities are getting exposed to European level developments and events. I think this is something that EGL is doing very, very well. So when they would go to these bigger events, study visits, and they see how youth work is happening in other places, and this is adding to their enthusiasm and motivation when they come back to try to do something extra, to go an extra mile, because in many municipalities, I imagine in Western Balkans, but also in other parts of Europe, youth work is just one more extra thing that people have to do on top of many things that they are already doing in municipalities, if there is no like a designated municipal youth worker. So I think this is also a little bit important to keep in mind. But I really like this idea of also public events and young people directly engaging with the municipalities. I think that is working quite efficiently as well. So thank you for bringing this up as well. We have an interesting, yes, Dragan, please.
Just to add to this, Anna, that you mentioned about the DGO program, for me, one of the greatest benefits of having the DGO program in North Macedonia was that representatives of the municipalities and of local youth organizations could go together to EGO events. And I think this brought so much in terms of getting to know each other, cooperation, and understanding what the different sides are doing, because it really makes a difference if a city council member or employee in the municipality spends 3 days together with the local youth worker in an event. So I think I would really encourage those of you that have the possibility to get involved in EGO, or to encourage your municipalities to do it.
Thank you so much, Dragan. We have a really interesting comment here. I think you should take notice of it maybe later, but exactly like local youth work, this huge connection to the young people directly, and this intersectionality is very well explained. Intersectorality is very well explained by Aisha in the chat. So if somebody has a moment, please have a look. In the meantime, we have a new hand. It's a hand from Maria. So please, Maria, you have the floor.
Dragan, I have a question. What works like really well in the Western Balkans in comparison with other contexts when we are talking about youth work and specifically about inclusion? If there is one thing that comes to your mind that you say, but this is what we do really good, and I give you some time to think about it.
So if there is one thing I would have to point out, that would be that we are on the Balkans, and I think in general in South Europe, relationship-based communities where people know each other and people care about each other, and where everyone is linked to somebody else in a different way. So I think what works is this community approach of working together, and going back to how you can approach the city and or authorities, and how to find people from other sectors. I think in the Balkans this works very well, these personal connections, and really in smaller towns, especially where there is even more much stronger community feeling and interdependence, and people knowing each other in so many different ways. I think this sense of collectivism is what can be also very disadvantaging in some cases. So I think this more collectivist approach that we have in the Balkans can really stop us in many ways from the development. But then in some cases, like working together especially on issues that the whole community is concerned with, like marginalized young people and inclusion work, I think it brings a value. It brings value that the city council member also is member of the school board in the local school, and he has a neighbor that also is facing certain challenges, so people can relate very much on this personal level and work together. I don't know if that makes sense, but just from experience.
Yeah, Dragan, maybe to use also these last few minutes, because I noticed you were rushing through your presentation in the last slides. If there is anything else you would like to add to the input that you had today, it seems like today we have lesser questions, so you could maybe take another minute or two before Olaja is ready to actually share her work.
I think I would go back to this question about youth work happening on the local level that Aisha talked about in the chat, because I think that's really the essence. We have European policies, we have national developments, national policies, but if you think about the life of young people, it happens in the community where they live. Schools are there, social services are there, organizations are there. They're first, youth councils, participation, everything is happening locally. And I think also that's why this community aspect of local youth work is so important, because in smaller towns especially, the sense of community is much greater. And even, you know, if there is no adopted like policy, youth work policy on the local level, it's fairly easy to meet with each other and to see what the priorities should be and what the focus should be on. And I think also the outcomes can be visible. So really, in the local communities, part of the challenge is, as I was saying before, that everything is more limited, the opportunities, the funds, but then part of the advantage, or the huge advantage, is that everything is also in one place. So not to forget that there are national policies and developments and European policies and developments that can be used and can be can serve as you know, the kind of this catalyst for development on the local level, but that really everything that happens that is relevant to young people is happening locally. And not to forget that when we develop models for youth work and youth participation on the local level, we have to think a little bit also out of the box, because maybe something to keep in mind is that on the Balkans, you know, this whole story of youth councils is kind of still interesting, and many cities are now thinking to invest in and trying to support youth councils to be established and to take more of an advisory role and to foster youth participation in the community. What we see is that young people are not, it's not their default mode of participation anymore, because generations are changing. So what we have to start thinking is, what is the space, what are the ways in which young people are comfortable to be involved and participate? What aligns more, what fits more to their needs and their lifestyle and their interest, in a situation where many young people are much more connected to something that is happening in the US compared to something that is happening next door. So how do we bring the concept of community back to those young people that are you know, much more detached from the real world in many ways nowadays? So again, you know, I think youth councils and youth policies and strategies, all of that is great, but we also have to open our minds and think how to get to young people, what is interesting, what is important to them. This is what I would like to end with.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is indeed so important, and to leave nobody behind. I think this is also something that we should take, like this inclusion aspect of youth work is so important to keep in mind, not to go beyond doing the bare minimum, but just to reach out to especially young people that are in more disadvantaged position. So for the moment, I think we are already ready to share Olaja's work. For those of you who are first time in idtalks, and I forgot to mention in the beginning, we have a graphic recording of all our talks that is done by our amazing, talented Olaja in the background there. And this is a moment that I'm personally always very much looking forward to, when Olaja is sharing her screen and giving a little bit of an insight to what she has been doing the past 1.5 hours. Olaja?
Thank you very much. I'm sharing my screen now, so hopefully you can see. And super interesting, Dragan, to hear these full stories. So starting from very personal experiences, how the situation was back in the days, and then how changes started coming, and based on what other factors that were also changing around. So very interesting to hear what are these keys to success, and how I perceived it, that everything is sort of interconnected, and then there is many factors that then we need to be kind of juggling. And yeah, of course, yeah, I think anyone who does some sort of youth work can relate, or could relate during your talk, to many of the examples that you were sharing with us. So yeah, for me it was a pleasure to grab some of these main ideas. And as usual, like, this recording is edited a little bit, so I will add some aspects, and then it will be shared as the final form in a few days with everyone who registered.
Yeah, thank you so much, Olaja. I can see a big smile on Dragan's face. Well, Dragan, this is a good moment maybe to say some final words before we start wrapping up today's idtalks.
I think I already said quite a lot. I wish I could hear a bit more from everyone else, but I think there are great comments also in the chat. I would encourage you to work together locally, because I think that's the key to success. And regardless of what your role is, even if you are, a teacher, even if you work in a completely different sector, I think when it comes to provision of youth services on the local level, the whole community, the whole village needs to, or in this case, the whole town needs to work together to ensure that that young people are taken care of, especially, as you were saying, Anna, those that are most disadvantaged and often forgotten by everyone. Before they go to, before the social services need to react, it's important that youth work is able to provide this kind of safety net and support to young people to grow and flourish. And really, it takes the whole community to do it. Yeah, so that's I would just encourage you to work together on a common goal when it comes to young people on the local level. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dragan, for being here with us today, for sharing from your experience and bringing this perspective of a neighboring region to ID Talks. It's always very welcome and interesting. And to me personally, as somebody coming from a neighboring region, just to let our participants know, there is still quite some time in this season, and we will be coming back in 2 weeks to take a slightly bigger municipality on board, this time Paris. So if you haven't been to Paris physically, you have a great chance to be there to learn about youth work practice. Definitely different from what we witnessed today, and maybe also more relevant for you if you're coming from a bigger size municipality. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much to our audience live. Not every time is that we are broadcasting the entire ID Talk online. So it was a pleasure also having you there. And we will see each other in 2 weeks on Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central European Time for yet another inspiring ID Talk. Thank you very much and goodbye.